Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to InsideAIR, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode we revisit the Operational Training Centre. We'll also reheat a few stories, just in case you missed them. But first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, in episode 35, we looked at the work of the Operational Training Centre that prepares the RAF's Expeditionary Air Wings for operations globally. A year on, the OTC has a new boss, it's adapted to changing threats, and is now looking to enhance its team of operational experts. AS1 Kirwan picks up the story.
Yep, I'm here in North Yorkshire at RAF Leeming, at the Operational Training Centre. If you've not heard of the OTC, it's responsible for ensuring personnel are prepared for whatever challenges may await overseas. It's not the first time I've been here either. I did a podcast ahead of personnel deploying to Romania for an enhanced air policing mission. You can still listen back to that episode if you want to. It's episode 35. Now, the reason I'm back and doing another podcast isn't because I'm now the designated OTC correspondent. It's actually to meet the new boss of the centre. I wanted to ask Wing Commander Reid what his priorities are and how he's going to ensure the training that's been delivered is enough to ensure personnel are fit to deploy and ready to face any unexpected challenges. I chatted to the Wing Commander ahead of another Expeditionary Air Wing deploying, this time to Estonia, for NATO's Baltic Air Policing mission, where jets are patrolling the skies, protecting allies and reacting to any incursions or incidents. Here's that chat.
By background, I'm a helicopter pilot, having started off years ago as a search and rescue pilot, moving through flying for the Army Air Corps and then on to sport helicopters, as well as some various diversions with different Army units. And by chance, at the end of a flying tour, I ended up as part of the precursor to the Operational Training Centre when really it was in a big period of change, which led to the formation of the Operational Training Centre in 2014. So I was lucky enough to have been part of setting this up based on my experience of extensive deployments with the Support Helicopter Force and with Army units as well.
What was it like then, back in 2014?
We were still steeped in the lessons of Optelic and Opheric, so we were really trying to translate the experience of that into how do we then support the RAF in its need to deploy initially in the Middle East, but also looking into wider areas to deploy, which and a lot of that is just pulling out the underlying lessons which don't change regardless of what operating location you're at. I'm now back at the OTC as the officer commanding. Things have obviously moved on since I left the OTC in 2016, and the OTC now retains the focus of training Expeditionary Air Wings. At the moment we're busy finishing off the training for 140 EAW who will be deploying for support of Op Azotais in Estonia. At the same time, I'm also the UK's national representative to NATO, where I am responsible for assessing readiness of air units, so be it transport, tanker, fighter, and also now attack helicopter. And I'm then reporting through Number 11 Group up to AirCom in NATO, and then onwards to SACA on a state of readiness of those units.
How do you feel about being back here?
It's an opportunity because I'm fortunate. I've got a lot of experience, and it's a real privilege to be able to train units, because what we're seeing now is less deployed experience, because the Operation Telic and Operation Herrick are firmly in the rearview mirror. The deployed opportunities within OpShader are less, and they're less expeditionary. To be honest, but we still have to prepare our young men and women to be able to deploy at short notice to locations where they may well be setting up from scratch an aircraft operating facility to form their deployed operating base that will then support the delivery of air power, be it with fixed wing, fast jet or transport aircraft, or even rotary wing. So it's a great opportunity because you're having to translate a lot of the lessons that we've accrued over the years and then work out how you pass on those lessons to people whose experience is different, and also their learning styles are different from the way that some of us may have learnt it 10, 20 years ago.
With your kind of connections then with NATO, how does that benefit your position?
It benefits in numerous ways. Obviously, since the events of February last year with the invasion of Ukraine, the awareness of NATO and what NATO brings as a coalition has become that much more important. And we're very much a gateway into providing that understanding. And we're also looking at interoperability, because as well as evaluating UK flying units against NATO standards, we're also looking across our sort of partner nations from Germany, France, and not only are we comparing our levels of readiness against them, we're also looking at their learning experience. So we're in this fantastic petri dish of sort of evolution of delivery of air power, because some of the lessons we're learning, other nations are learning, and it's then how do they respond to those lessons. So there's a lot of exchange of best practice, and it can be quite daunting being the representative to NATO for these things, but at the same time it's brilliant, because you see some of the absolutely brilliant practices that go on from phenomenally well-funded nations like the United States to some of the innovation, because we're also seeing how lessons are coming out of Ukraine and seeing just some of the innovative ways that they do things, as well as reminding us of the importance of doing the basics well, which is something, a key lesson that we import into EAW training here at the OTC.
Was there much of a handover with your predecessor in terms of lessons that he's learned?
Yes, I mean the nice thing about the OTC was that we came from different professions. So my background as aircrew has one approach, and then he was a training officer, so his approach lent very well towards developing some of the training processes that we have. So the operational training centre, whilst it's easy to focus on the O of operation, but the T for training is really important. So what that does in the handover really highlights the blend of thinking that we've got here for making sure that all our operational lessons are trained in such an effective way that our personnel benefit.
What are some of your priorities?
My priorities really are to keep developing the training. So really that's how do we ensure that all the hard-won lessons are passed on to the people who attend our exercises, and at the same time how do we continue to develop the training, because we can't just prepare to fight the last war, we have to be prepared to fight what comes next and deploy into this rapidly evolving operational space. And so to do that, I've got to be prepared to not only just continually deliver a training package, it's develop that training package in response to that. So there's a lot of conceptual work that goes with it. So we work very closely with 11 Group to understand the thinking coming out of 11 Group, and again looking to NATO and some of our partners, we leverage lessons from them as well to sort of blend that. So we make sure that our personnel are fit to deploy, they're fit to operate alongside partner nations, and really they're as prepared as we can make them to face whatever unexpected challenges emerge. So yeah, for me it's really to continue to stretch the boundaries of what the OTC is able to deliver.
Do you think enough physical exercise, getting out and about, do you think that's part of it? I mean, we a lot of our training looks at building the headquarters, and whilst that seems quite a small part of training, when you actually look at what building a headquarters consists of,
because for the RAF, there isn't a set point in our career where we're clearly trained to work in a headquarters. So there's a lot of training or knowledge that's assimilated, whereas here we are delivering training to work in a headquarters. But then when you look at how we do that, we look at teamwork, we look at how people communicate and how people communicate effectively. We work with leadership, we look at very heavily at how do you empower people so that they understand what the points are where they need to escalate information up the chain, so that the leaders at the sort of executive level can make the decisions that allow the EAW to deliver effect. So it's that's a key part of it, and to do that we have to have people who are fit to deploy, and with that comes physical fitness, but there's also the sense of resilience that goes with it, and just that sort of open-mindedness that comes in needing to deploy, because you're preparing people to step into an environment that may be utterly foreign to them, not only geographically but also in terms of the experiences that they encounter when they're there.
This EAW is going out to Estonia. It's obviously very close to the conflicts in Ukraine, which is ongoing. How are you and the team here, the White Force team, helping them get ready for any eventuality?
I mean, that comes in a lot of the preparation that we do. We've spent several months preparing this training package, so whilst it seemed to them that they've almost been drinking from the fire hose of what we've done, but every experience that we've given them has been based on real world experience. So we've looked very in great depth at the operating environment that they'll face. So they've had the intelligence brief, so they understand the operational picture that they'll encounter. We've dealt with cultural training as well, so they understand the country they're going to. But we've also taught them at a practical level how do they engage with the host nation that will support them. So we've looked at that, and then a lot of it then becomes how do we build the unit, because it's important to remember that these people are plucked from across the RAF. Most of them have never worked together, nor do they know each other. So in a short space of time we have to build a unit. So our injects as well are designed to ensure that people understand who they communicate with and why, but also it starts to build those relationships, the command relationships, and the sense of reliance that they need to have on each other to carry them through 6 months away from home.
That was Wing Commander Reid talking to me about the role of the OTC and getting personnel ready for being deployed, and the importance of NATO standards. Now we're going to hear from Flight Lieutenant Rose, who's been working at the OTC for a number of years. She told me about her role.
The matrix is what we use to assess an EAW when they come for a PDT or an exercise Agile Eagle. And it is a really clever, whizzy thing on Excel that has all the NATO standards that we're looking at assessing. And it works out based on the answers that we put into it. So yes, no, met, not met. It works out the final score or performance level of the EAW that we're assessing.
And why do you need to have those NATO standards?
It's really important to have those NATO standards because the standards are what we are holding an EAW accountable to. We need to make sure that they are good to go, especially on a PDT as we're doing right now. It's important that we know what standard the EAW are at, and the NATO standards are obviously very applicable to advertised PDT, but it's important that we are holding ourselves accountable to NATO when we do things like Agile Eagle as well, and those standards that we're using are also cross-referenced to air standards as well, so we are looking at that whole picture. An Agile Eagle is about making sure that the personnel who are held at readiness, if they do have to go out the door with an EAW, just making sure that they are ready as a formed unit, ready to go, which is slightly different to obviously an advertised, because we know that they are definitely going, but on an Agile Eagle they may not, but it's just about giving them scenarios to test them just in case they were to. It's about making sure that if they do have to go, we are confident that they are at a standard and good enough as a formed unit to do what they need to do, and that they can meet those NATO and air standards.
You've been here at the OTC for quite a while, and you've worked with a few different bosses. Can you just talk me through whether there's been any changes over the years, or just your general thoughts about your experience so far?
It was quite a challenge when I first started. It was only my second tour, and I'd done a stow tour as my first tour, so previous to joining the OTC. So to dive straight in and join an organisation like the OTC, which is operationally focused, and doing that training on such a regular basis, it was a challenge, and it's collective training as well, which not a lot of people understand or are maybe as aware of. I think while I've been at the OTC, the focus on collective training has increased and improved. There's definitely a lot more awareness now, and it's really helped me gain a lot of understanding about collective training and preparing to work in an operational environment. A lot of people will have heard of individual training when you go through Holton or Cranwell, or you go and do your phase 2, or you go off and do an IOD or something like that. That is individual training. It's about you as an individual progressing your understanding and how you move through the Air Force. Collective training is about bringing together people who can work in all areas across the Air Force, and bringing them together and getting them to understand what each other does and how to work collectively as a team. Understanding that it's not just about being stovepiped, it's about understanding and working jointly to achieve a joint outcome.
And Flight Lieutenant Austin's been working at the OTC for 4 years. He's encouraging others to consider putting themselves forward to train the EAWs, and told me how his career in the RAF is beneficial to that training.
My background was flying. I flew on Nimrod aircraft, which is a maritime patrol aircraft. I deployed in operations, but also within that, I also had responsibilities for planning aspects of flying, going to different locations, operating with different nations as part of NATO. And as a consequence of that, I sort of understood how NATO operated and how the RAF fits into NATO. When I first joined the RAF, it was back in 1982, and at that time, we were very much into the Cold War, and we all know that, by 1992, the Cold War really had sort of ceased, and our focus went elsewhere. But now, of course, after Ukraine, we've suddenly realised that NATO once again is very important in the forefront of what we do from the UK and how the Air Force supports it.
And it's really important here, isn't it? It's all getting the EAW to those NATO standards.
Absolutely. And by and large, most the UK way of operating is pretty much in line, but there are just a few little subtle changes that they've got to be aware of from how they've operated before. But these exercises, that's what we try and bring out, is for them to understand, how NATO operates and how they must adapt into that in particular environment.
What was your initial impression when you first came to the OTC?
When I first came out, I thought a very professional organisation. It covered all the elements that the RAF works in. The first exercise I did, the amount of detail that was put into the exercise, I thought was absolutely phenomenal, really, on that side there, and the amount of effort that was put in to make the exercise as realistic as possible. A lot of the injects, as we call it, that were being used are actually things that have occurred. They haven't sort of been made up, they've actually occurred. So we're actually giving the audience, the target audience, real, injects that have occurred or were real life incidents that had actually occurred, and we just turned into an inject to make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
Every time we do an exercise, we look at what we've planned and how realistic that is, and also how effective it is on the training side. It's that fine balance. You don't want to overload the staff so much that they don't learn from it, because that's the whole objective about this. They learn from it and they retain that information, how to do it. The other piece is that the core staff here, the regular staff on the OTC, they also go out to the areas that the EAWs deploy to, and they look at that environment they're in and bring that knowledge back to develop the exercises. So all the exercises are continually reviewed for being relevant to the tasks that have got to be done.
With your experience here and with your experience generally working in the military, do you have any thoughts on where the OTC needs to go in terms of training?
They are in the right direction. I don't think they need to necessarily change. They will adapt as the mission changes for the EAWs. One of the things I think people have to be careful of is not to sort of think, oh, we might do this in the future, therefore let's do this. And then suddenly, something else comes along because we've adapted, we've gone too far out of arc in terms of where we need to be. So, for example, our focus now is on training to be part of NATO, in that NATO environment. If we suddenly decide, as I used to go in the past, to operate in a desert environment, let's say, then perhaps we're not doing the right thing, because we know that they're likely to be deployed to NATO rather than the desert. That's just looking back at the past, and it's hard to predict the future. But the UK is in a coalition, is a partner in NATO, and I think that's where the focus has to be at the present time. And I think what they're doing to achieve that, all the exercises are relevant, and the inputs are relevant, and the training that the staff get out of it is first class to deliver the operational capability for the RAF.
Would you recommend someone coming along and working at the OTC?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's because it covers all spectrums, and even as I said, I've spent a long time in the Air Force, but even I've learned things that I didn't understand. So it's as I say, every day is a learning day, and it's a good environment to work in, and it's nice to see when you bring a potential EAW in for training, how they develop during that period of time. And it's nice to see that we're able to do that, and they're receptive to our training, and they enjoy it. At the end of the day, it's hard work for them, but they leave knowing that they are a better unit than they arrived. If people feel they've got something to offer, particularly as a reservist and all the rest of it, then I think they should try and see if they can join the OTC, because one of the difficulties we have is that across the whole of the RAF as regulars, everyone's stretched and short of people, and reservists can often provide that continuity, whereas regulars, they move from one job to another job, and they can't always guarantee that. And I think what the OTC like is the continuity that the reservist brings for their exercises, because they haven't got to train them up each time. It's a known entity, and that's what makes it good for the OTC and fun for the individual.
If working at the OTC sounds good to you, Wing Commander Reid is after personnel to come along to provide that really important pre-deployment training.
The White Force, they are a bit of a sort of hidden gem in the Royal Air Force, in that they're a very mixed bunch of people. So in terms of my White Force, 50% of them are reserves, be that part-time volunteer reserves or coming from the base support groups. Most of them are ex-regulars who have, through working alongside the OTC previously, discovered that they really enjoy training, but when it's become time for them to leave the Royal Air Force, they've decided to continue with reserve service, working alongside the OTC, because my core staff is only 9 people and 1 civil servant. I couldn't begin to deliver what I need to deliver with that number of people. So I rely on this. And again, if you look at my reservist population, the accumulated experience goes into hundreds of years of Royal Air Force service, which is awesome. It's daunting when you're in command, because some of the reservists that I'm in command of here have held very weighty command appointments, but that just gives you the challenge to be a better boss. And what you see is a desire amongst them to go in there and mentor and train the training audience, such that the information that's being passed, it's gold dust really for some of the things that are being passed because of their operational experience. We've got people with multiple deployments to the Middle East, multiple deployments to the Falkland Islands. We've got we've just been joined by a Flight Sergeant A1 Stanaval examiner who brings with her immense experience in the admin world, which is great. We've got superb support from the logistics side of things. We've got RAF Regiment, we've got RAF Police, we've got Ops, we've got former aircrew, we've got engineers, Army EOD. The breadth of experience in White Force is phenomenal, and what it means is that the experience of the trainee is far enhanced by these really dedicated individuals, and we're very much an example of the whole force in action. That I've got regulars working alongside reservists, I have a civil servant in here, and they're all working for that common goal of ensuring that an EAW is prepared to deploy on operations and to be able to face whatever is thrown at it for that period that they're away from home.
What about when some of your reservists who have been doing this a while have to retire?
That's a major concern to me right now. They are reservists who I almost have to fight them off when they want to come on exercise anyway, because they are so keen and so dedicated. Losing them takes away a massive amount of experience, and it becomes a challenge to go and source that experience elsewhere. We are constantly looking to encourage people to come and work alongside us. Part of that is we do what we colloquially call talent spotting for finding those dedicated trainers. We then bring them alongside the OTC. We make our assessment whether or not they're a good fit for the role. I then take them, and through our links with NATO, all of my personnel are NATO evaluators, so they go to the NATO school at Oberammergau, which is a week-long course. The OTC sends them off on the course, funds the course. They come back as a NATO evaluator. I can then use them for training events like this, but also conducting evaluations in support of NATO. So I'm really concerned about losing some of the experience, because I think they'll be hard to replace. But it's part of the sort of cycle of the military career that people will eventually reach that point they can no longer serve in uniform. It's a huge shame. The OTC is very much a case of that with the experience that I have, some of my people are on the upper age range of the reserve contract, but what they're doing every day they're here is delivering such value that I can never really put a measure on that value, other than looking at the individuals in the exercise play area who are doing coming on in leaps and bounds because of the experience that my reservists are imparting to them.
What kind of people are you looking for? What attributes do they have?
People with experience in the RAF. People who've got a desire to train their the people who effectively pick up the baton and carry on doing the roles that they've enjoyed in the RAF, because it's such a vital role, training our personnel. In the Royal Air Force, you don't get to the position that you're in without having undergone lots and lots of training, but training is a continual process. You can't just carry on doing your job. And at some point you have to be replaced and somebody else does your job. So I need people with experience across all the professions in the Royal Air Force who just have that desire and sense of satisfaction they get when they've taught somebody to do something and do it well. Because to have the opportunity to prepare somebody such that you get the very best from them, and you know that they're going to perform well on operations, In terms of jobs that you can do, this is probably one of the more rewarding and satisfying jobs that I've done in some time, and I've got quite a bit of comparison along my Air Force career. But this is something where you're not only engaged with the wider RAF, so you don't have the isolation that comes from staying within one force or one role or one station. I'm able to work alongside the range of roles in the RAF. I'm also able to work alongside the reserves, and it's fascinating. It just makes every day interesting, and I enjoy coming to work.
Wing Commander Reid there talking to me about the kind of person he looks for to come and work at the OTC and the importance of reservists.
Thanks, Emma. If you're currently serving as a regular or reserve in the Royal Air Force and would be interested in joining the OTC team, Wing Commander Reid would love to hear from you via ModNet.
For InsideAIR, this is Reheat with AS1 Victoria Andrews. RAF and German Air Force personnel are undertaking training to prepare for their first integrated NATO air policing mission in Estonia. The RAF Expeditionary Air Wing will take over responsibility for the mission from their German counterparts in April, with integration and joint sorties taking place in March and April. Training together allows both forces to fully understand and integrate each other's maintenance and operating procedures. The RAF and Royal Air Force Oman have strengthened their long-standing partnership by completing the annual bilateral air combat training exercise Magic Carpet. Typhoon FGR-4s from Royal Air Force Coningsby, a Voyager air-to-air refueling aircraft from RAF Bryce Norton, and more than 300 personnel from across the RAF have completed the 2-week exercise. The scenario-based exercise was designed to ensure both air forces maintain the ability to operate alongside each other in response to any external threat. 1 year on from the invasion of Ukraine, RAF personnel continue to play a vital role training their Ukrainian counterparts in modern warfare techniques. Training officer Flight Lieutenant Meller describes how the Ukrainians approach the training.
I've been really impressed with how enthused and motivated the Ukrainians are. I mean, when it's something as real as this and it's something that's happening at home for them, they are so enthusiastic to receive the training. It's not just training for them that is phase 1 or phase 2 training like it is for us. This is real and they will be using these skills that we're taught. So I think you can't ever overlook the training that they're receiving here. It's hugely important.
And finally, the Royal Air Force Mountain Rescue Service has conducted its annual winter training in Scotland. The week-long training introduces winter skills to new troops and consolidates advanced skills for more experienced personnel. The service, celebrating its 80th anniversary this year, was born out of wartime necessity to save the lives of downed aircrew in the mountainous regions of the UK. That's Reheat on InsideAIR.
I'm AS1 Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of an F-35B Lightning displaying to crowds at the Royal International Air Tattoo 2022. The Lightning is a stealth aircraft operating alongside the Typhoon. It's a multi-role machine capable of conducting air-to-surface, electronic warfare, intelligence gathering and air-to-air missions simultaneously. In British service, the aircraft is known only as F-35B Lightning, losing the 2 variation of the name as it is in fact the 3rd RAF Lightning. The first being the Lockheed P-38 and the second being the English Electric Lightning. Squadron leader Steve Long became the first British pilot to fly an F-35 in January 2010. The first frontline Lightning unit, 617 Dambuster Squadron, arrived at RAF Marham with an initial 4 aircraft in June 2018. Subsequent work has seen a massive infrastructure upgrade at RAF Marham, the RAF and Royal Navy's main operating base.
That's all for this episode of InsideAIR. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to InsideAIR, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.